Returning late from a business trip, a millionaire decided to give his 4-year-old daughter a goodnight kiss. When he opened the bedroom door, he was shocked to find a dirty, ragged girl sleeping next to his daughter in bed. Furious about the intrusion into his safe home, he was about to remove the stranger when his daughter innocently whispered, "Daddy, can my sister sleep here tonight?" As he leaned closer to look, he nearly fainted. The two children were absolutely identical, like mirror reflections. But what truly brought him to his knees was when he saw the birthmark. Arthur Vance was a man built in the image of success, but forged in solitude. His early 40s showed none of the weight of endless board meetings or empire-shaping decisions, but they carried a shadow, almost imperceptible to the outside world, that rarely left him. The mansion where he lived, a monument of marble and glass perched on the highest point overlooking the city skyline, was a reflection of his life, imposing, magnificent, and often excessively silent. He had built an empire in the tech sector, a feat that demanded every ounce of his energy, but had, ironically, distanced him from the one thing that truly mattered, his family. His obsession with work was his armor, a refuge from a deeper pain, an addiction that consumed him and kept him from truly living. His paternal intuition, however, was an unfailing compass, a subtle alarm that sounded even through the densest fog of his professional dedication. It was this intuition that compelled him, after an exhausting business trip that had stretched for days, to break his usual protocol and go beyond the simple "I'm home" relayed by his assistant. He needed to see his daughter, Sophia. His rigidity with security was almost pathological, a legacy of a past that haunted him. No one entered or left that house without his knowledge or permission. Cameras, sensors, and discreet security personnel formed an impenetrable perimeter, designed to protect his precious Sophia from any conceivable threat. He loved her with an intensity that bordered on worship, a devotion amplified by the guilt that gnawed at his soul. That guilt had a name and a face, or rather, a face he never got to know. 4 years had passed since the cruelest tragedy a father could face. His wife, Helena, had endured a complicated twin pregnancy, a period of constant apprehension that culminated in an emergency delivery. 2 girls, small and fragile, had come into the world, but the joy lasted only a breath. In the chaos of the recovery room, amid medical complications and the flurry of nurses, one of the babies simply vanished from the hospital. No investigation, no matter how extensive or expensive, ever unraveled the mystery. The report said she had evaporated, leaving no trace. He and Helena were forced to accept the devastating loss, to focus their hopes and love on the daughter they had left, Sophia. But the wound from that day never truly healed in his heart. The feeling of having failed as a protector was a heavy anchor, dragging him into the depths of melancholy. On that cold Thursday night, jet lag weighed on his shoulders, but the image of Sophia, sleeping and serene, was the only reward he sought. He ascended the marble staircase, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the Persian rug. His daughter's bedroom door was ajar, which was unusual. Sophia was normally meticulous about closing it before bed. Arthur hesitated for a moment, a pang of curiosity mixed with fatigue. He pushed the door open carefully, expecting to find the room silent and his daughter curled up in her silk sheets. But what he found startled him. The darkness was nearly absolute, broken only by a sliver of moonlight peeking through the window, casting long shadows. Yet there was no silence. Low, almost inaudible whispers came from the bed. His daughter was not alone. Arthur's heart raced, a mix of alarm and confusion. Who could possibly be in here? His security was absolute. He felt a chill run down his spine, a premonition that something was deeply wrong. With a swift but hesitant movement, he fumbled along the wall for the light switch. The light flooded the room, revealing the scene that would make him question everything he knew. There, nestled beside his daughter, with tangled hair and a grimy face. Wearing clothes so torn they barely covered her body was an unknown girl. His first reaction was a mix of rage and terror. How had an intruder managed to get into his house, the sanctuary he had built to protect his child? How had his security failed so spectacularly? Before he could form a question or even shout, Sophia's sleepy voice broke the tense silence. "Daddy," she mumbled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Hey, can my sister sleep here tonight?" The word sister hit him like a bolt of lightning, but he immediately dismissed it as a child's fantasy. He moved closer, his mind already formulating orders for his security team, but as he looked more closely at the dirty girl, at the sleeping features of this unknown child, something paralyzed him. The resemblance between the two was inexplicable. He swallowed hard, the air seemingly sucked from his lungs. This wasn't a common resemblance. This was a sight that defied reason. The scene before Arthur froze time, turning his initial rage into a muted shock. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was a near-mirror image. The same light brown hair, the same delicate shape of the face, even the way the long eyelashes rested on their pale cheeks. The street girl, with all her dirt and the marks of a hard life, was the exact replica of his Sophia. Arthur felt a tremor run through his body, a cold sensation that had nothing to do with the night air. He blinked, trying to dispel the mirage, but the image remained unchanged. The intruder wasn't just similar to Sophia. It was as if time had split and created two versions of the same child. His eyes moved from the unknown girl to Sophia, who was now watching him with a mixture of sleepiness and expectation. "Daddy!" Sophia repeated, her voice a thread of sound. "Aren't you happy? She's my sister. She came to find me." The innocence in Sophia's voice only deepened Arthur's confusion. How could his daughter even think this girl was her sister? It was a cruel trick of fate, an illusion brought on by exhaustion and unresolved grief. Yet the power of the resemblance was undeniable, hammering at his mind with overwhelming intensity. He knelt slowly beside the bed, his knees weak, and reached a trembling hand toward the sleeping girl's small fist, as if searching for confirmation, for something that could demystify this disturbing vision. It was then that his eyes, trained to notice the smallest details in financial reports and complex contracts, caught something that made him hold his breath. On the unknown girl's left wrist, nestled just below her thumb, was a small, crescent, moon-shaped birthmark, perfect and unmistakable. Arthur felt the blood run cold in his veins. He had seen that mark before, many times, daily, on Sophia. The mark was a shared secret, an intimate detail that he, Helena, and Sophia knew. This was not a coincidence. It couldn't be. The air seemed to have grown thick, hard to breathe. His mind, once so logical and pragmatic, spun in a whirlwind of disbelief and an almost painful hope. He remembered the day the twins were born, the elation and the dread. The moment the hurried and visibly flustered nurse had briefly shown him the two newborns, identifying Sophia by that very mark. But the other had vanished before he could even memorize her features. He had guarded the image of Sophia, small and fragile, and the crescent moon on her wrist like a treasure. Now, here it was, replicated on the street girl, under the dim light of his daughter's bedroom. The coincidence was, in fact, impossible to ignore. Arthur felt dizzy, a ringing in his ears. The control he exerted over his life, over his house, over his emotions, crumbled like a house of cards. Who was this child, and how, of all the children in the world, had she ended up here, in his daughter's bed, bearing a birthmark identical to that of his lost twin? His paternal intuition, which had alerted him to the unusual presence, now screamed a truth that defied logic and reason. He looked at Sophia, who now seemed more awake, her gaze fixed on the sleeping girl beside her. The stillness of the night was broken only by the soft breathing of the two children. The unknown girl stirred, a small sigh escaping her chapped lips, and her eyes slowly opened. They were the same eyes as Sophia's, a deep brown, but they carried a melancholy and a wariness that didn't belong to a child her age. Fear flickered for an instant, quickly replaced by an almost adult-like resignation. She looked at Arthur, at the luxurious mansion around her, and then at Sophia, a shy, almost invisible smile appearing on her lips. "Hello," she said, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "You're Sophia's dad, aren't you?" Arthur couldn't answer. The word dad sounded strange, a distant echo amid the storm brewing inside him. The street girl sat up in bed, ignoring the filth on her clothes and Arthur's stunned gaze. She seemed incredibly comfortable, as if she were exactly where she was supposed to be. "My name is Luna," she continued, "and I'm 4 years old." 4 years old, the same age as Sophia, the same age his lost daughter would be. Arthur felt the impact of those words in his chest, a blow that left him breathless. The girl then revealed, with disarming simplicity, the essence of her short, hard existence. "I don't remember my real parents," Luna said, her brown eyes fixed on Arthur, "but I always felt I had a family somewhere, a family that was waiting for me." The words echoed Sophia's own nightly laments, who often asked through tears about the sister who got lost, a persistent shadow in her childhood thoughts. Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine. It wasn't possible, but what if it was? What if the greatest secret of his life, the mystery that haunted him, had just climbed through his window, brought by the persistence of his daughter's love? An unsettling question hung in the air, promising to unravel truths he had never dared to confront. He needed answers, and he needed them now, before his sanity abandoned him completely. The air in the mansion seemed to have grown heavier, each beat of Arthur's heart echoing in his ears with the force of a war drum. Luna, sitting on Sophia's bed, looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and a vulnerability that tightened Arthur's chest. "I always felt I had a family somewhere," she repeated, and the phrase hit him like a cold wave. Sophia's intuition, her unwavering belief in a sister, now took on a terrifyingly real dimension. Arthur's mind, accustomed to order and the ruthless logic of business, struggled to process the impossible. The birthmark, the overwhelming resemblance, the age, Sophia's words, everything pointed to a single, unbelievable conclusion. But how? He had searched for years, spent a fortune, and with every false lead, every closed door, the pain of loss had grown sharper and hope more fragile. "Sophia, sweetie," Arthur finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. How did you find Luna? How did she get in here?" Sophia, with the innocent simplicity of childhood, pointed to the window. "I left it open, Daddy. Every night. I knew she would come." His daughter's words, which under any other circumstance would have been cause for a reprimand for breaking such a vital security rule, now sounded like a prophecy. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. His daughter, in her purity, had forged the breach in the fortress he had built. He knelt, his gaze fixed on Luna, who now seemed a little frightened by the intensity of the moment. "Luna," he began, trying to infuse as much gentleness as possible into his voice. "Can you tell me more about where you lived, who you were with?" Little Luna shrank back slightly, her eyes expressing an underlying fear. I don't remember much," she mumbled, looking away. "I was with some people. Then I ran away. The streets were cold. I always missed someone. I saw Sophia on the streets and she looked familiar to me." The mention of the streets sent a chill through Arthur's blood. His daughter, his precious child, had endured that. The image of Luna, dirty and tattered, now fit into a narrative of unimaginable suffering. He realized he needed to act with caution, that this child's trust was as fragile as glass. The revelation that Luna had been on the streets, and the implication that Sophia had seen her before, added layers of complexity and guilt to his already tumultuous mind. Just then, the bedroom door opened, and Helena, his wife, walked in, still half asleep, her eyes widening in surprise to see Arthur there in the middle of the night, kneeling beside Sophia's bed, where a third child lay. Helena, despite her timeless beauty, carried in her eyes the shadow of a severe depression that had consumed her for years after the disappearance of her second daughter. The loss had left an indelible mark on her soul, and seeing him now, even unconsciously, next to an unknown girl, was a scene that shocked her to the core. "Arthur, what's going on here? Who is this child?" she asked, her voice choked with a mixture of confusion and an unnameable dread. Arthur stood up, stumbling slightly, and tried to form an explanation that could make sense of the chaos. "Helena, I think—" He hesitated, the words caught in his throat. There was no easy way to say it. "Sophia found a friend, but she's no ordinary friend." He gestured toward Luna and then to Sophia, who was now smiling at her mother, a contagious joy on her face. She looks just like Sophia, Helena, and she has the same birthmark." The last words were a whisper, almost a lament. Helena moved closer, her eyes fixed on the street girl, and the lamplight revealed the crescent moon mark. A silent scream tore through her throat, and she brought her hands to her mouth, tears beginning to stream down her face. It was the mark, the same one she had kissed on Sophia's tiny wrist in the hospital. This was a moment of overwhelming recognition, but also of excruciating pain. The memories of the birth, the desperate search, the forced acceptance of loss, it all came rushing back with brutal force. Arthur knew he needed answers, and urgently. His mind raced to the records, to the hospitals, to the bureaucracy that had once failed so miserably. But then, the cruel memory. "There are no records, Helena," he said, his voice hoarse with despair. "Remember, many of the documents were lost or destroyed in that fire at the hospital shortly after." The sentence hung in the air, a grim reminder of the negligence and the fruitless search from years ago. Luna, sensing the rising tension, curled up on the bed, her child's eyes fixed on Helena, who was now sobbing openly. The girl felt the avalanche of emotions, and the trauma of abandonment was rekindled in her small heart. She wasn't used to this intensity, to these looks. She was used to indifference, to coldness. The new situation, no matter how much Sophia insisted she was her sister, was overwhelming and frightening. Arthur saw the fear in Luna's eyes, the hesitation. The path to the truth would be tortuous, and the first barrier was already up. How to make this child, traumatized by years of abandonment and struggle, trust them. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, knowing that every step would have to be taken with the utmost delicacy. The truth seemed to be right there, within his grasp, but at the same time, hidden behind a wall of forgotten memories and deep-seated childish distrust, creating a labyrinth of emotions and secrets that was only just beginning to reveal itself. The dawn dragged on, heavy and laden with a silence that, rather than a relief, had become a burden. Helena, after a painful outburst and embracing Sophia and Luna with an intensity that seemed to want to make up for years of absence, had finally fallen asleep on the sofa in Sophia's room, emotionally exhausted. Luna, nestled close to Sophia, had also drifted into a restless sleep, her small shoulders still tense. Arthur, however, remained awake, pacing the room, his mind in a frenzy. The lost hospital records were a monumental obstacle, a wall preventing direct access to the truth. He had faced adversity in his career, but none compared to the helplessness he felt now. The guilt for not having investigated the disappearance of the documents more thoroughly years ago gnawed at him. Back then, the pain was so overwhelming that the bureaucracy had seemed insignificant. He sat in the armchair by the window, watching the sleeping city, its illuminated skyscrapers like silent sentinels. Luna's face, even in sleep, showed a hardness that shouldn't belong to a child. Those features were those of a survivor. The image of her on the streets, alone, struggling, was a dagger in his heart. How could he have failed so badly? How could society have failed so badly? Sophia's question, "Can my sister sleep here tonight?" echoed in his mind, but now it carried the weight of an unimaginable reality. He needed more than a child's intuition and a birthmark. He needed irrefutable proof, a story that could be told and verified. And above all, he needed to earn Luna's trust. The next morning, breakfast at the mansion was a mix of caution and a restrained, almost apprehensive joy. A radiant Sophia didn't let go of Luna's hand. Helena, though pale and with swollen eyes, had a glimmer of hope that Arthur hadn't seen in years. Luna, however, remained silent, observing everything with suspicion. She barely touched her food, her eyes scanning the lavish table, the silver cutlery, the fine china, as if she were in a completely alien world. Arthur tried to start a light conversation, but Luna's answers were monosyllabic, and she avoided eye contact. The barrier of distrust was real and palpable. "Luna, sweetie, would you like to take a bath?" Helena asked, her voice soft and welcoming. "We have some new clothes for you, and we can do your hair." Luna flinched at the mention of new clothes and hair. The idea of being cared for, of receiving attention, was new and frightening. She looked at Sophia, who nodded with an encouraging smile. "It's fun, Luna. There's lots of bubbles and it smells good." Sophia's intervention, once again, was the catalyst. Luna, hesitantly, agreed. While Helena and Sophia helped Luna, Arthur mobilized his team. He would spare no expense. He needed investigators, lawyers, anyone who could unravel the puzzle. The immediate priority was to try to find any record, any clue linking Luna to the hospital, even with the information about the lost documents. The second was more delicate. He needed a DNA test. It was the only path to absolute certainty. But how to approach this with Luna, such a traumatized child? Late in the morning, Luna reappeared, transformed. Her brown hair, clean and combed, framed a face that, free of dirt, revealed an even more striking resemblance to Sophia. Wearing a new, simple but clean dress, she looked more like a doll than a street girl. Yet her eyes still held the same wariness. She walked with uncertain steps, but Sophia's gentle touch on her hand calmed her. Arthur felt a lump in his throat. Seeing her like this, so close to the daughter he had raised, was almost unbearable. He approached them, a carefully crafted plan in his mind. "Luna," he said, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers, "I know all of this is very confusing and maybe scary for you, but I need to understand how you ended up here. And for that, we need a little help. Would you mind going to a doctor with us, just to make sure you're okay and healthy?" The word doctor made Luna's eyes widen. She shook her head vigorously. "No, I don't like doctors. They hurt." The fear was genuine. Perhaps the result of some bad experience she'd had before. Arthur felt a setback. How could he explain the need for a DNA test without scaring her even more? It was a dilemma that weighed on his conscience. He needed the truth, but not at the cost of further traumatizing this child who had come into his life so unexpectedly. How could he convince her that this medical visit was for her own good and not a threat? The task seemed monumental. Arthur felt a tightness in his chest seeing Luna's reaction. The fear in her eyes was a mirror of the distrust he knew would be difficult to break. He couldn't force her, but the need for the DNA test was pressing, an urgency that beat in time with his racing heart. He looked at Helena, who nodded slightly, understanding the dilemma. Sophia, sensing the tension, squeezed Luna's hand. "It doesn't hurt, Luna. It's just to see if you're strong. Like me. Daddy takes me all the time. It's fun." Sophia's innocence, once again, opened a crack. Luna looked at Sophia, at the promise of fun and the security on her sister's face. "It's just a checkup, Luna," Arthur explained, his voice gentle and patient. No shots, I promise. And afterward, we can go anywhere you choose. To buy a toy, maybe, or ice cream. The mention of ice cream and toys seemed to have a magical effect. Luna's eyes widened a bit, and the tension in her shoulders eased. The promise of something good, something she may have never had, was a powerful incentive. After a few moments of hesitation, she nodded shyly. Chocolate ice cream? Arthur felt an immense relief, the first small victory. The trip to the hospital was surrounded by a discreet security team, maintaining Luna's privacy and avoiding any unwanted publicity. In the pediatric office of a trusted family physician, Dr. Evans, a welcoming woman with a kind smile, performed the routine exam. She knew the sensitivity of the situation and proceeded with the utmost delicacy. The DNA sample collection, a simple cheek swab, was done without drama while Luna was distracted by Sophia, who was showing her a storybook. Arthur felt a wave of emotion seeing the two girls so close, the same hair color, the same eye shape, the similar laughs. It was a sight he had longed for 4 years. While they awaited the DNA results, which would be expedited due to the urgency and Arthur's resources, the mansion began to transform. Luna's presence brought a new energy, a liveliness that had been lost over time. Sophia was ecstatic, showing Luna every corner of the house, her toys sharing secrets. Luna slowly began to open up. She was still cautious, but Sophia's smiles and Helena's kindness were disarming her. Arthur, meanwhile, worked tirelessly with his investigation team. The main focus was the hospital where the twins were born. Although the official records were lost, he knew that corruption left traces, however faint. Former employees, rumors, backroom stories. Every piece was vital. The first promising lead came from a retired nurse who remembered an incident in the maternity ward years ago involving the disappearance of a baby. He refused to give details, but mentioned powerful people and a lot of money. The mention of powerful people made Arthur's blood run cold. The investigation deepened, and in the second week after Luna's arrival, Arthur's team began to unravel a web of intrigue. Through unofficial sources and significant payments, they discovered the existence of a scheme. Corrupt former hospital employees were, in fact, involved in an illegal baby-selling ring for wealthy families who couldn't have children. The information hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. The place that should have been a haven of life and hope had become a den of dishonesty and suffering. Rage simmered in his chest, a cold, controlled fury. His daughter had been a victim of this cruelty. The news, however, came with an even more painful twist. His second daughter, Luna, had not been sold. She had been discarded. The buyer, an influential family, had backed out of the transaction upon noticing a small scar on the baby's arm, a result of birth complications. Perfection was a requirement, and Luna, with her small mark, was deemed defective for the purpose of an illegal adoption. She was abandoned at an overcrowded state-run group home on the outskirts of the city, an institution with a reputation for neglect and abuse. The news crushed Arthur. His daughter, considered a defect, thrown into a group home. The guilt he carried deepened, mixed with a boundless indignation. The image of Luna on the streets took on a new, grim context. She had run away from the group home, seeking a freedom that, ironically, had led her to her own front door. Luna's pain, the suffering she had endured, was an open wound in his own heart. He felt he had failed to protect his own flesh and blood. Now, he had to fight not only to prove the truth, but to heal the wounds of a child who had been cruelly rejected by the world. The need for justice burned within him, an unquenchable flame that drove him to see this through to the end, whatever the cost. The revelation about the baby-selling ring, and more painfully, Luna's disposal, hit Arthur with overwhelming force. He locked himself in his study, his hands trembling as he reread the reports. The word discarded echoed in his mind, a cruel reminder of human indifference. The small scar on Luna's arm, once an insignificant mark of post-birth complications, had become the reason for her condemnation to abandonment. The image of his fragile, defenseless daughter being dumped in an overcrowded group home turned his stomach. Rage mixed with pain, guilt, and an uncontrollable desire for justice. While Arthur plunged into the darkness of his discovery, the mansion continued to adapt to the new reality. Luna, despite the invisible trauma she carried, was beginning to blossom under the sunshine of attention and affection. Her adaptation was a delicate dance between hope and fear. Moments of pure joy, usually sparked by playing with Sophia, were interspersed with episodes of withdrawal when she would retreat into herself, her eyes distant, reliving memories of the streets and the group home. She still woke from nightmares, muffled screams tearing through the silence of the night, and Arthur and Helena would rush to her side, offering comfort and the promise that she was safe now. Sophia was the strongest bridge for Luna. With the patience and innocence of a child, Sophia taught Luna about the house, about routines, about love. She shared her toys, her stories, and even her most intimate secrets. Luna, in turn, responded to the purity of Sophia's love. She learned to laugh more, to let go a little, to feel the warmth of a hug without flinching. Sophia's presence was a balm for the wounds in Luna's soul. Arthur watched the two girls, sometimes from a distance, a lump in his throat. His daughter whom he had raised and his daughter whom he had lost, now inseparable. Helena, despite the latent pain of the new revelations, found a renewed strength in Luna. The depression that had consumed her for years wouldn't disappear overnight. But Luna's presence brought a new reason to fight, to rise again. She spent hours with the girls, reading to them, teaching them to paint, to sew. The small joys of life she had forgotten. The guilt of not having had the strength to search more intensely for her lost daughter haunted her, but the joy of seeing Luna there, alive and safe, was a gift she dared not waste. As the family tried to find a new equilibrium, Arthur's team delved deeper into the hospital investigation. The discovery of the scheme was just the tip of the iceberg. There were people involved at every level, from nurses to administrators, weaving a web of corruption that violated the morals and ethics of such a noble profession. Arthur felt a deep revulsion for those who preyed on the vulnerability of parents and babies. He vowed he would do everything in his power to expose every one of them and bring them to justice. In the middle of the third week since Luna's arrival, the news Arthur had been waiting for and dreading arrived. The DNA test results. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope. The words danced before his eyes, but one phrase stood out, bold and unmistakable. 99.99% paternity match. Luna was, without a shadow of a doubt, his daughter. His second daughter. The daughter he had lost. The tears he had held back for so long finally streamed down his face, washing away the pain of years of uncertainty, guilt, and grief. He wasn't crazy. Sophia's intuition wasn't a fantasy. It was all real. He ran to find Helena, who was in the garden with the girls. "Helena!" he exclaimed, his words choked. "The results, and they're here." Helena looked at him, her eyes a mix of hope and fear. Arthur hugged her tightly, handing her the envelope. As Helena read, tears welled up in her eyes too, a mixture of joy and a profound sadness for the lost time. They embraced, the girls watching them with curiosity. "Luna is our daughter." "Helena," Arthur whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She's our daughter." The joy was immense, but the news came with a new set of challenges. Officializing Luna's identity wouldn't be simple. The authorities, bent upon learning of the reunion, would question why he had taken so long to report the discovery. The shadow of irregularities hung over the situation, and Arthur knew he would have to fight to prove the legality and truth behind the reunion. Furthermore, Luna herself, conditioned by years of abandonment, would struggle to accept that she had finally found her true family, which would be a new obstacle in her journey of healing. The joy of discovery was now mixed with the complexity of reality. The DNA confirmation brought an overwhelming wave of emotions for Arthur and Helena: uncontained joy, profound relief, and a stabbing pain for the lost time. Embracing, with the document in hand, they cried the tears that had been trapped for 4 long years. Sophia and Luna, sitting on the garden swing, watched their parents', childish curiosity on their faces. Arthur pulled away from Helena, wiped his tears, and walked over to the girls, kneeling before them. "Luna, my love," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "you are our daughter, mine and Mommy's. You and Sophia are sisters, twins. That's why you look so much alike." The news, delivered so directly and full of love, had a complex effect on Luna. Her eyes, which had previously shone with an incipient hope, widened in a mixture of disbelief and dread. She shrank back slightly, as if the words could hurt her. Years of abandonment and mistrust had conditioned her small heart to doubt any promise of safety and love. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't have parents. I don't have a family. I'm alone." The rejection, as understandable as it was, hit Arthur like a knife. He reached out to her, but Luna flinched, fear evident in her eyes. "I ran away from the group home because nobody wanted me," she continued, her voice trembling. "People always leave me." Sophia, seeing her sister's distress, hugged Luna tightly. "No, Luna, we want you. I want you. You're my sister. Daddy and Mommy love you." Sophia's intervention was crucial, a link of connection that Arthur and Helena desperately needed. Helena, having recovered from the initial shock, also knelt, pulling both girls into a tight embrace. "No one will ever leave you again, my little one. We are your family, Luna. Forever." The scene was both painful and moving, a reminder of the long road they would have to travel to heal Luna's deep wounds. Arthur knew it wasn't enough to prove the truth. He had to build trust, brick by brick. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and bureaucracy. Arthur, with his vast network of contacts and influence, faced the authorities. The question about the delay in reporting the reunion was inevitable. He presented the DNA results, the investigation reports on the hospital scheme, and testimonies proving his relentless search over the years. The complexity of the case, the severity of the crimes committed at the hospital, and the evident good faith of Arthur and Helena ultimately prevailed. The authorities, shocked by the scale of the corruption, launched their own investigation, with Arthur promising full cooperation. In the midst of all this turmoil, an unexpected and deeply moving turning point emerged. It was a rainy afternoon, and the twins were playing in Sophia's room, building a blanket fort. Arthur and Helena were watching them, when suddenly Luna stopped playing and looked at Sophia with an unusual intensity. "Sophia," she said, her voice a little hesitant, I knew you existed." Sophia nodded, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "Me too, Luna. I always knew you would come." Then Luna made the confession that shook Arthur to his core. I always saw the open window from your room, Sophia. Even when I was on the street, even when I was in the group home, I saw the light. I knew it was for me." Arthur and Helena looked at each other, their hearts pounding. Sophia, the girl who always asked about the sister who got lost, had been leaving her bedroom window ajar for months, deliberately, in the hope that her twin sister would find her. It was proof of the unbreakable bond, the inexplicable connection that united them, even in separation. Sophia's intuition, her unwavering faith, had created the bridge that fate seemed to have destroyed. His daughter's revelation was a powerful emotional blow for Arthur. It wasn't just a coincidence, not just fate. It was the love of a child, an unshakable faith that had paved the way for their reunion. The guilt he felt for not finding Luna sooner mixed with a profound admiration for Sophia's insight He knelt again, this time with tears of pure gratitude in his eyes. "Sophia," he whispered, at a loss for words to express the depth of his feeling. She had kept hope alive. She had acted where he, with all his resources, had felt powerless. Luna, seeing her parents, emotion, and the light in Sophia's eyes, finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of the moment. The fear in her eyes subsided, giving way to a touching vulnerability. It was as if Sophia's confession had melted the last vestiges of her distrust. She wasn't alone. She had never been. There was a sister waiting for her, a home awaiting her, an open window that was an invitation to love. That moment, Sophia's confession, was a turning point, a crack in the wall of ice that had surrounded Luna's heart. But the wounds of the past were deep, and the journey to full acceptance was far from over, leaving Arthur and Helena with the challenging task of rebuilding the story of a family torn apart and reunited, without knowing when the shadows of abandonment would completely dissipate from Luna's soul. Sophia's confession about the open window echoed through the mansion, reverberating in Arthur and Helena's hearts. It wasn't just a revelation, but a testament to the unwavering strength of the bond between the twins. Arthur's guilt for failing to protect his daughter found unexpected relief in Sophia's intuitive wisdom. She, with the simplicity of childhood, had done what he, with all his power and resources, could not. That night, Arthur and Helena's sleep was more peaceful, but the challenges ahead were immense. The wound of separation was deep, especially for Luna, and full acceptance was still a distant horizon. The following weeks were dedicated to building a new foundation for the family. Intensive family therapy became part of the routine, a safe space for Luna to process the trauma of abandonment and for Arthur and Helena to deal with the complex mix of joy, guilt, and the echoes of loss. Dr. Evans, besides being a physician, was an experienced child therapist, and her gentle, patient approach helped Luna express her feelings through drawings and play. The first sessions were difficult, with Luna shutting down, but Sophia was always the key, encouraging her sister, validating her fears, and offering the security of her presence. Luna's adaptation to her new reality was an emotional roller coaster. She still oscillated between hope and fear, between the joy of being with Sophia and the dread that it was all a dream that could fall apart at any moment. During the day, the mansion was a stage for the twins, laughter and mischief. They ran through the corridors, built pillow forts, and painted colorful pictures that now adorned the once sober walls. But the nights were more challenging. Luna still woke from nightmares, muffled screams that brought back memories of the streets and the group home. Arthur and Helena took turns calming her, holding her in their arms, whispering words of love and promises of safety. One day, during a therapy session, Luna drew a dark labyrinth with a small figure alone in the center, surrounded by shadowy figures. At the end of the labyrinth, there was an open window and a bright figure, holding hands with another smaller figure. Dr. Evans, with her wisdom, explained that Luna was beginning to understand that there was a way out of the darkness, and that the window and her sister were her guides. It was progress, slow but steady. The first significant victory came on a sunny afternoon. Arthur was in his study, working on more details of the hospital investigation, when he heard laughter coming from the garden. He approached the window and saw Luna and Sophia running, chasing a butterfly. Luna tripped and fell, scraping her knee. Arthur rushed to help her. He picked her up, and Luna, to his surprise, didn't flinch. Instead, she hugged him tightly, her face buried in his shoulder. "Daddy," she whispered, the word a thread of sound, but it echoed like thunder in Arthur's heart. That daddy was the realization of years of searching, the purest and most profound acknowledgement of their bond. Arthur felt hot tears roll down his face, a mix of relief and an overwhelming sadness. The victory was sweet, but it came with the emotional cost of confronting the years of neglect she had suffered. He knew that every small progress Luna made would be a reminder of what she had lost and what they, as parents, had been deprived of. But it was a start, a real start. Luna's acceptance of the word daddy was a turning point. She began to call him Daddy and Helena Mommy more frequently, though still with some hesitation. Hugs became easier, smiles more genuine. However, the trauma of abandonment still manifested in other ways. Luna had trouble sleeping alone and would often sneak into Sophia's bed, where she found comfort and security. She hoarded food, hiding small pieces of bread and fruit, a remnant of the days when hunger was a constant threat. Arthur and Helena handled these manifestations with patience and love, ensuring she knew she would never go hungry again. The hospital investigation moved forward, with Luna's confession and the DNA confirmation. The authorities had irrefutable evidence to act. The press began to report on the case, though Arthur kept his daughters' identities protected. The names of those involved in the baby-selling ring began to surface, and the scandal threatened to ruin many reputations. Arthur felt a mixture of satisfaction for the justice being served and revulsion for the greed that had destroyed so many lives. He knew that the path to Luna's healing was long, and that justice for the culprits was only one part of the journey. The reunion of the twins was a miracle, but the scars of separation required continuous care and unwavering dedication, promising more challenges and surprising revelations as the family worked to rebuild the life that had been stolen from them. The word daddy, spoken by Luna, was a balm to Arthur's soul, an acknowledgement that transcended blood ties and reached the depths of his heart. Each time she called him, or Helena Mommy, it was a small victory, a sliver of light on a healing journey that unfolded with delicacy and persistence. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone, with Dr. Evans guiding the family through the complex emotional labyrinths, helping Luna unpack the layers of her trauma. Sophia was the great ally, Luna's anchor in her new reality, with her contagious joy and unwavering faith. The second week of the healing phase brought remarkable progress in Luna's integration into the family. She began to abandon some of her survival habits. The food hoarded under her mattress, the small stashes of snacks, became less frequent. She stopped trying to run away at night, a latent fear that had haunted Arthur and Helena. Now, when she woke from a nightmare, instead of trying to escape, she would snuggle closer to Sophia or ask to go to her parents' bed. The new life was becoming real and permanent in her young mind. She was finally accepting that the home she had found was hers to keep. Arthur and Helena dedicated themselves fully to the two girls, dividing their time between work, home, and therapy sessions. Arthur, though still focused on his business, had readjusted his priorities. Family now came first, a lesson learned in the most painful way possible. He began to delegate more tasks, to actively participate in the girls' lives, reading to them before bed, playing in the garden, or simply being present, a presence that was once scarce due to his obsession with work. Helena, in turn, was flourishing. The depression that had imprisoned her for so long began to give way to a renewed hope. Luna's presence was a catalyst for her own healing. She felt the joy of being a mother to two daughters again, but also dealt with a complex mix of feelings. The guilt for not being able to protect her lost daughter, the pain of the past mixed with the joy of the present. Individual therapy became a refuge for Helena, a place where she could process her emotions, her guilt, and the complexity of having Luna back. She was learning to forgive herself, to accept that she couldn't change the past, but could shape a future of love and security for her daughters. The subplot of Helena's adaptation was an arc in itself. In one of her therapy sessions, she confessed the weight of her guilt to Dr. Evans. "I should have known. I should have fought harder. I felt so weak after the delivery, so exhausted." And then she was gone, and I lost myself too. Dr. Evans comforted her, explaining that there was no blame in her suffering, that she had been a victim of a cruel circumstance. Slowly, Helena began to accept that her pain was legitimate, but that forgiving herself was essential to move forward and be fully present for her daughters. The connection between the twins continued to deepen, defying logic and science. They not only looked identical but also began to display synchronized behaviors that only true twins seem to possess. One afternoon, while Arthur and Helena were in the kitchen, they heard Sophia and Luna singing the same song, in the exact same key, without one copying the other. They would finish each other's sentences in conversation, guess each other's thoughts in games, and sometimes have identical nightmares, waking up at the same time, seeking comfort from one another. It was a connection that transcended the years of separation, a bond that time and distance could not break. Arthur watched these moments with a mixture of awe and gratitude. It was living proof of the miracle that had happened in his home. The science of DNA had confirmed the kinship, but the magic of the twins' connection was something beyond any rational explanation. It was the manifestation of a love that refused to be broken. He knew that life would never be the same. The mansion, once a silent and sometimes lonely sanctuary, was now filled with the joy and adorable chaos of two children. The journey to healing was not yet over, but the foundation was being built with love, patience, and the unbreakable connection of his daughters, promising a future where the shadows of the past would finally be dispelled by the light of family unity. The mansion, once an echo of silence and solitude, now pulsed with the vibrant energy of Luna and Sophia. Each day, Luna blossomed a little more, her defenses falling away like dry leaves in the spring wind. The trauma still manifested, of course, in small gestures of apprehension or moments of quiet reflection. But the overwhelming majority was of smiles, laughter, and the sweet certainty of belonging. Family therapy, guided by Dr. Evans, continued to be the foundation for this transformation, allowing Luna to express her fears and Arthur and Helena to better understand the nuances of her recovery. Arthur, with his sharp paternal intuition, noticed every nuance in Luna's recovery. He observed the way she snuggled closer to Helena, how she sought Sophia's hand in moments of uncertainty, and how her eyes, once so wary, now shone with a growing confidence. The guilt he carried diminished as he saw the happiness on his daughter's face. He had failed in the past, yes, but now he was here, present, building a future. His obsession with work had transformed into an equally intense dedication to his family, finding a new purpose and balance. Helena, for her part, experienced a profound renewal. The shadow of depression that had enveloped her for years began to dissipate. She devoted herself completely to motherhood, enjoying every moment with the girls. The guilt over the past loss still surfaced in her thoughts, but she was learning to manage it, to forgive herself. Seeing Luna smile, hug, and call her mommy was a powerful antidote to the pain. In a conversation with Arthur, she confessed, "I thought I would never feel this joy again. I thought a part of me had died with her, but now, with Luna here, I feel like I've been reborn." The twins' connection, unbreakable and mysterious, continued to astonish everyone. Their synchronized behaviors became more evident, almost a secret language between them. One morning, Arthur found the two girls sitting on the staircase, both with the same book open in their hands, reading in silence, but with their lips moving in perfect sync. Another time, Luna began to recount a dream she had, and Sophia completed the story, describing identical details that she had also dreamed. It wasn't telepathy in the literal sense, but an empathetic connection that transcended logic, a manifestation of the unbreakable bond that had united them since the womb. The second subplot of Helena's story gained strength as she processed her emotions. She actively participated in the investigation, providing details of her experience at the hospital, the way she felt neglected after the birth, and the questions that were never answered. Her voice, once silenced by pain and depression, now echoed with strength and determination. She was becoming a driving force in the quest for justice, not just for her family, but for all the others who had been victims of the scheme. The hospital investigation, fueled by Arthur's resources and Helena's testimony, advanced at an accelerated pace. The authorities, shocked by the scale of the corruption, were determined to punish those responsible. Names were revealed, depositions were taken, and the web of dishonesty began to unravel. Arthur and Helena followed every step, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and revulsion. The exposure of the scheme was a victory, but the cruelty it represented was a scar on the soul of society. The initial obstacle of Luna's distrust had been largely overcome, but a new challenge presented itself: the girl's total adaptation to the opulence of the mansion and the life she had never known. At first, Luna felt intimidated by the large spaces, the staff, the abundance of everything. She still preferred the coziness of a simple corner to a grand hall. Arthur and Helena strove to create an environment that was both safe and familiar, without overwhelming her. They encouraged her to explore, to choose, to feel like the mistress of her new space. Dr. Evans emphasized the importance of patience and creating a predictable and safe environment. Luna needed routines, attachments, daily proof that this life was not a house of cards that would collapse. In a particularly moving moment, Luna, upon seeing a stray puppy on television, asked Sophia, "Will he find a home like I did?" The question, laden with hope and vulnerability, showed how far she had come in her own acceptance. She already saw herself as someone who had found a home. The family was rebuilding, each brick laid with love and dedication, but the battle against the shadows of the past was not yet fully won, promising more moments of challenge and triumph before complete peace could be achieved. The mansion, once a bastion of rigidity and formality, now exuded the warmth of life. Filled with the laughter and innocence of two little girls, Luna, with each passing day, submerged herself deeper into the security of her new family. The adaptation, which once seemed like a steep mountain, was becoming a gentle hill to be climbed with the constant support of Arthur, Helena, and especially Sophia. Family and individual therapy continued to be a safe harbor for Luna and Helena, allowing them to unpack the traumas of the past and build new narratives of hope and overcoming. Arthur watched Luna's transformation with a heart overflowing with gratitude. The little girl who had arrived dirty and scared now ran through the gardens, her hair flying in the wind, a genuine smile illuminating her face. He saw her interact with Sophia, their games becoming increasingly complex and creative, and the telepathic connection between them was a constant source of wonder. At one point during dinner, Luna began telling a story, and without anyone noticing, Sophia started narrating the same event, completing the details and feelings of her sister so precisely it was as if they were reading each other's minds. It was the magic of twins, a symphony of souls united by a remarkable destiny. Helena, in turn, found a strength she never knew she possessed. The chronic sadness that had accompanied her for years was being replaced by a renewed vitality. She devoted herself to Luna with an overwhelming passion, as if to make up for lost time. But in a moment of deep reflection during one of her individual therapy sessions, she realized that Luna's healing was also her own. "Dr. Evans," Helena said, her hands trembling, "I thought I was helping Luna, but she's saving me. She brought me back to life." It was a painful and liberating revelation. The acknowledgement that her daughter's love and resilience were a mirror to her own journey of overcoming. The hospital investigation reached a new level of tension. With the evidence gathered by Arthur and the information provided by Helena and the authorities, the net closed in on those responsible. The names of influential doctors, administrators, and even a senior executive of the city's healthcare system came to light. The media, which had previously kept some distance to protect the girls' privacy, now began to release details about the scheme, exposing the cruelty and corruption that had stolen babies from their families. Public outrage was palpable, and Arthur felt that justice was finally within reach. Despite all the progress, one last emotional hurdle remained for Luna. She still had flashes of her life on the streets and in the group home, moments of fear and loneliness that made her withdraw into herself. The memory of being discarded, of being considered defective because of a small scar, was a wound that still ached. Arthur realized that for Luna to heal completely, she needed to reinterpret that scar, to transform it from a symbol of rejection into one of resilience and strength. On a rainy day, as the girls were playing in their room, Arthur found them looking at the scar on Luna's arm. Sophia was touching it gently. "What's this, Luna?" Sophia asked, her voice full of curiosity. Luna shrugged. "It's a mark. I was born with it. It's why they didn't want me." The sadness in her voice was evident. Arthur felt this was the moment. He sat beside them, pulling Luna onto his lap. "No, my love," he said, his voice soft. "That mark isn't a defect. That mark is special. It's the mark that brought you back to us." He explained to her that because of that scar, she hadn't been sold to the wrong family, that she had been guided by fate and by Sophia's window to the right place, to the right family. "This scar, Luna, is proof of your strength. It's proof that you're a survivor, and it's proof that you were destined to be here with us." Luna looked at the scar on her arm, and then at Arthur, at Helena, who had entered the room, and at Sophia. Understanding slowly dawned in her eyes. The story he had told transformed the narrative of her scar from a symbol of rejection to one of destiny and strength. It was a powerful transformation, a reinterpretation that planted the seed of full acceptance in her heart. The wound was still there, but now it carried a new meaning. The last vestige of rejection began to fade, paving the way for a complete emotional resolution. But the climax of justice was yet to come, promising a dramatic conclusion to the Vance family saga. The Vance mansion had become a cauldron of emotions. Arthur's reinterpretation of Luna's scar was a giant leap in her healing journey. The small mark on her arm, once a stigma of rejection, was now an emblem of her strength, of her destiny. Luna began to touch the scar with a new pride, no longer with shame. The girl's inner transformation was palpable, reflected in her more upright posture, her brighter eyes, and her firmer voice. She no longer hid her hand, but would occasionally show it with a smile. Arthur felt that the family was coming together in a way he had never imagined possible. Luna's presence not only healed the wounds of the past, but also revealed the depth of the love that had always existed, dormant in his heart. He and Helena, united by pain and now by joy, had emerged as more present, more attentive, more complete parents. Their relationship, which had been tested and shaken by loss and depression, now grew stronger each day, cemented by the common purpose of loving and protecting their daughters. Helena, empowered by her own healing and the pursuit of justice, was more active than ever. She attended meetings with lawyers and prosecutors, providing detailed and emotional information about the night of the birth and the subsequent trauma. Her voice, once a whisper of pain, was now a cry for righteousness. She refused to let other families suffer the same fate. The strength of her conviction inspired Arthur and everyone around her. The hospital investigation culminated in a series of spectacular arrests. Several doctors, nurses, and administrators were detained, their names splashed across newspaper headlines. The healthcare executive who had tried to cover up the scheme was also implicated. The news of the exposure and arrest of those responsible brought a mix of relief and satisfaction to Arthur and Helena, but also a deep sadness for the extent of human cruelty. It was a bitter victory, a reminder of what had been stolen, but it was justice. However, the emotional climax of the story was yet to come, and it would not be found in the courtrooms or the newspapers, but within the walls of the Vance mansion, in the hearts of his daughters. It was a hot summer night, and a storm was brewing, with distant thunder and lightning that illuminated the night sky. Luna, who still had frequent nightmares, woke with a scream, but it wasn't her usual cry of terror. It was a sharper, more desperate scream. Arthur and Helena rushed to the girl's room. Sophia was also sitting up in bed, her eyes wide, her hands covering her mouth. She was pale, trembling. "Daddy, Mommy!" Sophia exclaimed, her voice shaking. "I had the same dream as Luna. It was so scary." Luna was crying, pointing at her own face. The mean man, he hurt me." Arthur and Helena looked at each other, a shock running through their bodies. It was the first time Sophia had not only shared a dream with Luna, but had also felt the same terror, the same physical pain. The nightmare was not just a vision, it was a shared sensory experience. The girls, in their sleep, had connected on a level that transcended understanding, reliving a trauma that Luna had suffered. Calmly, Arthur asked Luna about the dream, and Sophia, her eyes fixed on her sister, began to complete the sentences to describe the details. Both spoke of a large man with a gruff voice who pushed and yelled at them, and of a fall that resulted in an injury to the arm, Luna's small scar. The description was so vivid, so synchronized, that Arthur and Helena had no doubt Luna was not just dreaming, but reliving fragments of her abandonment at the group home. And Sophia, through their deep connection, was experiencing the same pain. Helena hugged both girls tightly, her own eyes welling with tears. "My loves, you're safe now. No one is going to hurt you. You're together." The emotional climax was the irrefutable proof of the twins' unbreakable connection, a bond that not even time or separation could erase. The suffering of one was the suffering of the other, and the healing of one would be the healing of the other. Arthur felt an overwhelming wave of love for his two daughters. The past, with all its darkness, was becoming clearer, and the future brighter. That moment of shared pain was, paradoxically, a catalyst for healing, a powerful reminder that together they were invincible. But resolving the trauma and Luna's full acceptance still required more than just the connection. It required forgiveness, not just of others, but of herself, so that peace could finally reign in their hearts. The night of the shared nightmare was a watershed moment. Arthur and Helena, witnesses to the intensity of the connection between Sophia and Luna, felt the overwhelming force of the bond that united them. It was not just a blood tie, but a symbiosis of souls, a mirror of emotions and memories. Luna's trauma, relived and in a way shared by Sophia, made the need for healing even more pressing. Dr. Evans, upon hearing of the episode, explained that the synchronicity was a rare and profound manifestation of the twin bond, and that now, with Luna safe, her brain was processing repressed memories, and Sophia, through their connection, was feeling them. The following weeks were dedicated to intensifying the therapy, focusing on reframing Luna's memories. Dr. Evans used playful and narrative techniques to help Luna retell her story, transforming the mean men into distant figures and fear into strength. Sophia, always by her sister's side, actively participated, offering support and affection. Sophia's presence was a balm, a bridge to the reality that Luna was no longer alone. The first gradual resolution came when Luna, in a therapy session, drew a new labyrinth. This time, in the center, there was not one solitary figure, but two, holding hands, walking out of the labyrinth toward a bright sun. Dr. Evans praised her, and Luna, for the first time, smiled with a full sincerity, a smile that reached her eyes. It was the beginning of acceptance. She was seeing herself as part of a whole, no longer a lonely island. The second victory manifested in daily life. Luna stopped hoarding food, a habit that was a remnant of her days of hunger. She felt secure, knowing there would always be plenty to eat. The nightmares became less frequent and less intense, and when they did occur, the presence of Sophia, or Arthur and Helena, was enough to calm her. She finally stopped trying to run away at night, a clear sign that her new life was real and permanent. She was allowing herself to be loved, to be cared for, to be a daughter. The mansion, with its vast spaces, ceased to be intimidating and became her home. As Luna healed, Helena also progressed in her own journey. Individual therapy helped her confront the guilt that had eaten away at her. She learned to forgive herself, to accept that she had not failed as a mother, but had been a victim of cruel circumstances. Luna's presence was a constant reminder of the miracle that had happened, and Helena embraced the joy of having her two daughters. One day, she told Arthur, "I always felt a void. A piece was missing. Now, Luna has filled that void. I feel whole." The family, once fragmented by pain, was finally complete. The subplot of justice for those responsible for the hospital scheme also found its conclusion. The trials were long and complex, but the evidence was overwhelming. The corrupt employees, the doctors, and the executive were finally convicted and imprisoned, serving sentences that, while unable to erase the pain of the past, ensured that other families would not suffer the same tragedy. Arthur and Helena followed every step of the process, feeling the satisfaction that truth had prevailed and justice, however late, had been served. It was a powerful message that integrity and ethics should always triumph over greed and dishonesty. In a moment of reflection, Arthur realized the depth of the transformation in his own life. The obsession with work, which had once been his escape and his identity, had given way to an unwavering love and dedication to his family. He had learned that true success was not measured by fortunes or empires, but by the richness of human connections. That rigid, lonely man, once consumed by guilt, had become a loving father, a present husband, and a guardian of his daughter's happiness. The characters' emotional conflicts resolved in a satisfying and realistic manner. Luna, who had arrived scared and distrustful, blossomed into a cheerful and confident child. Helena, who had been consumed by depression and guilt, found peace and joy in her restored motherhood. Arthur, the millionaire who had lost himself in the pursuit of success, found true purpose in his family. The journey had been arduous, filled with pain and twists, but the family's unbreakable love had prevailed. The scars of the past would remain, but now they would be reminders of strength, resilience, and hope, no longer of pain and loss, setting the stage for an inspiring and meaningful conclusion. 5 weeks had passed since that fateful night when Arthur Vance found two girls sleeping together in his daughter's bed. The mansion, which once echoed with the silence of a solitary existence and the shadow of unresolved grief, now shone with life, filled with the joyful sound of double laughter, the sway of brown hair, and the constant hum of twice the mischief. The transformation was visible not only on the once cold walls of the house, but in the hearts of each of its inhabitants. Luna, the street girl who had arrived scared and dirty, had blossomed into a radiant child, a living testament to the power of love and security. Her eyes, once filled with apprehension, now sparkled with the confidence of someone who had finally found her place in the world. The twins, Sophia and Luna, were now inseparable. Their synchronized behaviors, which had once surprised Arthur and Helena, had become an integral part of family life. They not only completed each other's sentences, but moved in an almost magical harmony, a ballet of intertwined souls. If one stumbled, the other would extend a hand before the fall even happened. If one laughed, the other would join in with an identical melody. The connection that transcended years of separation, a bond that time and adversity could not break, was now the driving force behind the joy and peace in the mansion. Arthur, the magnate who once saw work as his only salvation and source of identity, had found a new purpose. The obsession with building empires had been replaced by a dedication to building a home. He delegated tasks, turned off his phone at crucial moments, and was present in body and soul for his daughters and wife. The guilt that had gnawed at him for years was finally soothed by the sight of Luna, safe in his arms, by the joy of seeing his two girls playing together. He had learned the most valuable lesson of his life. The greatest treasure was not in profits, but in the priceless wealth of his family. Helena, in turn, had been reborn from the ashes of her depression. The shadow that had consumed her for so long had dissipated, replaced by a light in her eyes that Arthur hadn't seen in years. The joy of having Luna back was a miracle, but the healing journey of her lost daughter had also been her own redemption. She had forgiven herself, accepted that she couldn't change the past, but could shape a vibrant future. Her energy was now channeled into the love and care of Sophia and Luna, and the mansion was filled with the fragrance of her freshly baked cakes and the melody of her lullabies. Justice, however late, had prevailed. Those responsible for the hospital's scheme, finally exposed and imprisoned, ensured that the Vance family's tragedy would not be repeated with others. It was a victory that did not erase the pain of the past, but planted the seed of hope for the future, a reminder that the truth, no matter how they try to hide it, always finds its way to the light. The room that once echoed with the loneliness of one child was now the epicenter of laughter, whispered secrets and the unbreakable connection of two sisters. The beds, once for a single girl, were now the stage for shared stories and tight hugs. The window, which Sophia had left ajar for months, had become a symbol not of vulnerability but of faith, of a child's intuition that refused to accept loss. The girl who arrived dirty and scared, with distrustful eyes and a heart marked by abandonment, turned out to be the missing piece in a family's puzzle. She proved that sometimes the greatest miracles arrive disguised as impossible coincidences, brought by the persistence of love and the intuitive wisdom of a child who never stopped believing that her sister would come home. Life in the Vance mansion was now a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the strength of family ties, and the beauty of a love that, even when tested by the harshest trials, remains unbreakable.